A couple of weeks ago, we had a discussion in my private Facebook group about the authenticity of tango and what is it about tango that if you were to take that thing away, it would stop being tango. For some people, it's the fact that tango must be danced between men and women. It seems to me like a very old school traditional viewpoint that I rarely encounter myself, but I've heard from people. And in fact, recently I got a comment on my social media about me dancing with another woman, and somebody posted, "Oh, tango is only danced between men and women." So it's out there. And there's some other things that people associate specifically with tango. Some people really go to the embrace and the shape of the embrace and how the embrace works, that if you take that away, it would stop being tango. But for most people, I gathered from the discussion, it's the music. The music is what makes it tango. And I tend to agree with that because tango as a dance exists as a byproduct of the music. The dance arose in response to the music. So tango music is really the birthing place of the dance. And if there is such a thing as authentic tango, I do think that the music is where it would most fully exist. So if the music is so important, I thought I would do an episode on what is it exactly that's important for us to know as dancers about the music. Because, of course, you'll hear this sentiment a lot from teachers who emphasize musicality and other dancers who talk about the importance of expressing the music versus focusing on vocabulary. We all know in our minds that music is important, but I find that a lot of people don't realize what they really need to know versus what's cool to know. You know, there's different things about the music that are just cool to know, like what year something was written or who was the poet that composed the certain lyrics of this particular song, or where exactly the geographical location of the street is that this one song talks about. Like, those are cool things to know, but you don't have to know them as a dancer. But there are some things about the music that you really have to know. And I was reminded of that this past weekend, when I was dancing at a tango event, and I ended up having this fun discussion about how I learned to recognize orchestras. And recognizing orchestras and knowing the orchestra that's playing, recognizing it by ear, to me has been the most important skill that I developed to help my dance progress. And here is where I'm sure some people who are listening are going, "Oh, well, never mind. That's just not for me. I could never learn to recognize orchestras. I don't have it in me. I don't have the ability to recognize. That's too sophisticated." And most people that I talk to feel that way, who start tango. But I was just like that. When I first started tango, I didn't actually like tango music. And it all sounded the same to me. I didn't hear any differences. And when I actually first was spending time listening to the music, it was really difficult for me to listen to it for a long time. I could only handle about 15 to 20 minutes, and then I had to turn it off because it was so fatiguing for my mind. And even now, when I, from time to time, will have interactions with dancers outside of tango that are from swing dance or salsa who'd never heard traditional tango music, and I play something for them, and the look on their face is just so interesting because to them it sounds so different and so strange. When I teach raw beginners, I've noticed one of my biggest challenges as a teacher at first is just to get people to hear the beat. So don't feel bad if you feel overwhelmed at the idea of learning to recognize orchestras, because most people start out very much in the same place. And it's not really that ultimately that complex, but it does require a little bit of a process, which I will share with you my process that you will be able to apply right away at the Milonga. And if you apply my process, I think within a few months, you'll notice that you will be able to recognize at least half of the music that gets played at the Milonga, because ultimately it's the same music over and over again. Whatever event you go to, wherever you travel, you will hear a lot of the same music. So it's not as much music as you think that you have to memorize. Now, I said there were several things about the music that you need to know, and the recognizing orchestras is definitely the big one. That's like, I think it's such an important aspect of developing as a dancer, and it doesn't really get talked about very much. I know a lot of very seasoned dancers who don't recognize orchestras. I know a lot of DJs who, when they dance, they can't recognize orchestras very readily. So why am I making such a big deal out of it? You can dance without it, absolutely. I don't want to say that it's the one thing that will completely change your dance. There are other things that really help with your dance in terms of technique and embrace. But I find that at the level that I really love dancing at, consistently, what I go after and the kinds of dancers that I end up really enjoying dancing with are the dancers who know the music. They know which orchestra is playing. And I can feel in their body that they know it. They know the song. I also appreciate when I dance with people who can express the difference in different orchestras. So this idea that when you dance a Di Sarli versus a Pugliese, something changes in your body. You don't dance those two the same way. Consistently, for me, those are the things that I really enjoy the most. And at that level, I don't really care about vocabulary as much as I care about playing. And to me, I always use this metaphor of like getting to jam with somebody on, when you think of musicians getting together, jazz musicians, let's say, and there's this play going on between them. If you watch jazz musicians sort of improvise against each other, you'll have one musician propose an idea and then the other one kind of picks up and elaborates. And that's how it becomes between dancers when both dancers really know what they're dancing to. So no, it's not a requirement. And especially when it comes to following, as a follower, you can actually go really, really far without knowing the orchestras, without knowing the music. And you can develop as a really good follower, which this is what I did. I danced for, I don't know, maybe 7, 8 years without really knowing the music, not knowing the orchestras. But I could feel the music. And I know a lot of followers, if you're listening, those of you who follow, I know a lot of you really feel the music. You can hear it, you can hum it, you can dream it, you remember it. And so I'll hear this a lot from followers, like, oh, I know the song, I just don't know the name of the orchestra. That's a very common sentiment I hear. And so we feel this music, but there's this difference between feeling it inside and actually learning how to show it. For me, when I started leading, that's when I actually started really paying attention to the music, because I realized there's this next level of dancing. There's this dancing that's sort of reactive to me, where it's like, you don't know the song, you're just there, you're a follower, it doesn't matter, you're just going to close your eyes and you're going to react, and you're going to be in this total present state, which is a beautiful, beautiful state. I love that. And it's that state when you open your eyes and somebody asks you what you just did and you're like, I have no idea, where was I? So it's great. But then the next state, I feel like the next level of exploration for dancers is when you're sort of turned on to the fact that you're dancing to a particular song with a very specific character and personality. And there is no other song like that out there. And you will never dance it this way ever again, because this moment in time will never come. And how are you going to dance this differently? How are you going to express those side steps, even just a simple side step, expressing it in a way that really shows that it is Di Sarli versus D'Arienzo versus Troilo? That's the level of exploration that I really love being at. This is kind of why I love to dance with different people, and I love to dance these songs over and over again. Now, when you're thinking about this idea of dancing the different tones and characters of tango songs, you also have to realize that there's levels of complexity within the music. And this is where knowing your orchestras really helps, because it orients you to what's really going on. I find that when people don't know the music, a lot of times dancers are susceptible to either feeling great or bad about their dancing without really knowing why. So an example would be somebody who's just like, oh, I'm really dancing really poorly today. I don't know what's going on. My balance is off. I feel really bad. And then, a lot of times they'll be like, no, you're dancing fine. It's just the music. You don't like the music. That's what I realized with myself. I actually, at this event that I went to, I kept track of all the tandas that I danced. So I actually did a post about this. I ended up dancing 58 tandas total over the 3 days, which is about 11 and a half hours. Kind of impressive. I was like, wow, that's a lot of dancing. And I looked at each day, how much I danced. And it was very clear that there was one day that I did not like the music. Most days, most of the events, it would be kind of either split, like I would dance 8 or so tandas and I would sit out 7 or something like that. Sometimes it was a little bit bigger split, like I would dance 9 and sit out 5. One day I actually danced a lot more than I set out, but for the most part, it was kind of split. But the day that I didn't dance as much, I actually set out more than I danced. And I actually did an analysis of like what was played. And I looked at the orchestras, and it was very clear to me that I did not like that music. And so to me, I did not place a lot of weight on the fact that I wasn't dancing well and I wasn't enjoying my tandas very well, because I was like, this is just not my music. This DJ does not jive with my sense of musicality. And that's okay. You actually learn to accept that too. You'll always have DJs that sort of resonate with your vibe and other DJs that don't. And it's a great thing to know, because there are totally DJs that I will not go to a milonga when I hear that they're DJing, because their style of DJing is just not something I like. So I know that it's not going to be something I enjoy the same way. I might go for other reasons, but that's like a huge reason for me to attend or not to attend. So sometimes it helps to know the music just so you orient yourself where you're at. And some of the music is very, very simple, and some of the music really complex. So this is one of those like musicality tidbits that I think would be really helpful for everyone to know right off the bat. Music, tango music that we dance to primarily at this point spans between roughly 1930s to end of the 50s. Like that's kind of the span of what's called the classical canon, or what I would say, the classical canon of tango that you dance most of the time. Now, there's more contemporary orchestras showing up in the rotation, but for the most part, it's going to be this block of time. And the earlier the music is, the closer to 1930, maybe late 20s, the simpler it's going to be. And it's going to have a really, really nice, consistent beat. So when we're thinking about our level, and let's say you're a beginner leader, or you're just not very confident on the dance floor, identifying music that has a very strong, consistent beat that you can anchor to will help you feel better as a dancer. So music that belongs to that time period, late 20s, early 30s, some late 30s too, usually will be a little bit slower. It will have a nice solid beat that you can follow. Music that then develops from there, we're entering into the 30s and 40s, will be more complex. It will be faster. Some of it will be faster. And then it gets more and more complex in these other ways. So what you want to know for yourself is that the earlier, the simpler, the later, the more complex. So when you hear tango music that comes on, that sounds really polished with a lot of complexity, and you can't really hear the beat very clearly, and you're sort of lost, realize you're listening to music that just comes from a later period, and your ears are not quite ready for that yet, right? So it's kind of like when you go to the gym, you have to start with lower weights first and then pick up the heavier weights. It's not going to work for you to just try to digest something that's super complex right away. So knowing that kind of gives you a little bit more room to say no sometimes to dances that you feel are too intimidating because the music is too complex. Or if you're really interested in that kind of music and you're thinking to yourself, why is it so hard for me to dance this music? Why am I having such trouble hearing my partner, or understanding what they're leading, or understanding how to lead it myself? Know that it's because the music is more complex. And as I said, for me, it took a while to build up that muscle to hear the music and not, completely lose my mind after 20 minutes, which is what it was before when I first started. To then I didn't mind it so much. And then I started hearing more and more details. And then, the more you're with it and the more you're engaging with it, you start picking up different things, and you start picking up different things that you notice about yourself and how you react to the music. And so this other element of musicality, I think that every dancer should understand, is that the study of musicality is not about you doing a service to the music of tango or doing a service to tango. It's not like you're entering the tango university, and in order to be a dancer, you must be able to do all these things and know the music a certain way. It's not a requirement from out there, but you can think of it as a path to understanding yourself more, because I find that every dancer has a sort of a default setting. Like you come in and you sort of have your own preferences already, and your body likes to move a certain way, and you resonate with certain types of music a certain way. And listening for the music that really moves you and tracking how you're responding to it and how easily or difficult it is for you to express it, it's part of that self learning and self-understanding that this is how you are as an artist. This is how you interpret the music. This is how you feel it. This is what makes you unique. And those are the things that other dancers are going to be really appreciating about you. So in my case, I have a roster of people for different types of orchestras in my mind that I seek out specifically because I know that they like that orchestra a lot. And I really love dancing with someone that I can tell really loves the music that they're dancing to. It's very obvious in their body. It's like their body can't contain all the excitement and wants to show all these things. And that's kind of how I am. If you ever dance with me on a Troilo or a D'Arienzo, you'll feel somewhat challenged perhaps because I just can't handle all the awesome detail in those songs. So it's a really fun experience. It can be a really fun experience to get to know what kind of music you like and what kind of music you don't. And to me, the music I don't like is just as important as music I do like. You have to have the contrast. Like life, everything exists in opposition, you know? And if you want to know what my ultimate orchestra that I don't like dancing to, the orchestra that will like make me put my shoes on and leave, to me, is Tango by DeAngelis. Okay, I said it. I don't like DeAngelis tango. I love DeAngelis valses, but if I hear a DeAngelis tango coming on and those vocals, I just leave. And to other people, they have other types of orchestras that they don't like and other orchestras that they love that make them put their shoes back on. And when you're in the know about it, when you kind of know what people mean when they throw these names around, you're kind of in on the game. And it's not like you have to participate in this part of the game. It's okay to just go and dance and enjoy yourself. But, you know, sometimes for some of us, a little bit nerdy people, a little bit geeky, we like to learn and we're curious. This kind of level of understanding, it can be pretty fun. And I liken it to sports games. You know, if you think of baseball, which is the most confusing game in the world to me, I don't understand it. And you're there and you're listening to all of this communication and people are clapping for different things. And I'm kind of like, why? What's going on? What is happening? So you're sort of feeling this outsider vibe, right? That's kind of how it can be with tango music, right? You walk in, you step in a conversation with a couple of DJs and they're talking about all these things with tango music and years and orchestras. And it feels isolating. It feels a little bit like they're being, you know, a little snobby or whatever. This is kind of how I felt. I ended up getting caught up in lots of conversations among DJs. And most of the time I just sat there in silence and while they pontificated about certain versions of different songs. But as I guess, matured in my learning and my curiosity, and I became a little bit more involved with DJing and my taste evolved and I learned more, I kind of found that it can be pretty fun and it can provide a lot of creativity to your experience at the Milonga because it's just another point of connection with someone that you can talk about the music and you can learn about each other through the music. So if you point out that some valse or some tango is your favorite because you danced it with this one person on the coast of Cuba in 1986, you know, that's like a really rich detail that can be a point of departure for other conversations. And I really love collecting those little stories from people. Now, if you're feeling sort of lost as to how to even start to do that, and you're wondering if you have the ability to recognize orchestras and actually have that level of understanding of the music, I want to give you a few reassuring thoughts. One is that tango music, like all music, is I think of it as a force. It's sort of a molding force to your brain. Our brains really like music. They like repetition. We thrive on structure of sound. We love that. Haven't you noticed that you can hear a song from 20 years ago and you still know all the words? That's just such an amazing thing about the brain and music. So you definitely have the hardware to do this, and you already are doing it, even at the level of just basic hearing of the rhythm. If you can hear the rhythm, you already are further along than 98% of the population of the world. It can be complex. As I said, some beginners who are coming in, right now I have a student who's a raw beginner, and all we work on is I'm walking around clapping my hand and just having him hear the rhythm over and over again. So if you are at that level, that's already proof that you can do this next step. And so now I'm going to give you my process that I used to learn to recognize the orchestras, and you will need to try it out and report to me and let me know how it works. I would give it a few weeks. Don't try to do it in one weekend, but I will be excited to hear your progress with it, because I'm sure it's going to work. Okay, so here it is. You need to make it a game. So a few years ago, maybe about 6 or so years ago, I was still living in Portland and was dancing with a friend of mine, and we were dancing to something, and at the end of it, I was like, "Oh, what is that?" And he's like, "Oh, it's a D'Arienzo. It's a D'Arienzo 1949 or something." And he's like, "No, it's 1947." I'm like, "Wow, you know the music so well." It's like, "How do you recognize that?" And he says, "Well, with this D'Arienzo," and it was a late D'Arienzo, so it might have been like 1950s or something. He said, "With this D'Arienzo in particular, it's like everything is happening all at once. Everything is happening all at once. All the instruments are going all at once." And when he said that, I was like, "Oh, okay, D'Arienzo, everything happens all at once." And it sort of stuck. So I thought to myself, you know what? I'm just going to remember that, and I'm going to try to guess when I hear D'Arienzo. And to make it a little bit more complex right away, I gave myself the task of learning to recognize 4 of the sort of iconic orchestras that everything revolves around in tango music, which is Di Sarli, D'Arienzo, Troilo, and Pugliese. Those 4 orchestras. I decided I was going to learn to identify those. So every tanda that I heard at a milonga, I would try to guess one of those. Okay. And I had 3 tries to guess. And if I got it, one of those 3, I got the point. That was my game with myself. So obviously, my success rate was very low at first, because it's not like those are the only 4 orchestras that are playing. And 4 orchestras is a tall order to start recognizing right away also. But what happened was this. So I would try to guess throughout the tanda. I would try to guess in my head, and I would keep track. I'm like, well, could be this, it could be this, or it could be that. Then I would ask the DJ, I would ask my partner, I would ask someone else. And in the early days, I had a buddy who was doing the same thing. So we would always like look at each other after the tanda, and I'd be like, "Who was it? Who do you think it was?" And we would like consult and try to figure out who it was. If I didn't get it, let's say I'd be like, "Oh, it's D'Arienzo. Is it D'Arienzo?" And I'd be like, "No, it's Laurens." And I'd be like, "Okay, why did I think it was D'Arienzo?" And I would think, okay, I thought it was D'Arienzo because of this specific detail that I associate with D'Arienzo. Well, then I would use that detail and say, "Oh, that's interesting. Laurens has that same detail. So now I need to hear the differences between Laurens and D'Arienzo, for example." Like, so that would be a mental note for me. It's like, oh, I frequently think Laurens is D'Arienzo. That's interesting. Or for me, it wasn't Laurens, Di Sarli, early Di Sarli. And early D'Arienzo for me sounded the same for a long time. And so anytime I would try to guess on an early Di Sarli, I would guess D'Arienzo and vice versa. So I would then be like, okay, next time I'll remember that. Next time I hear this detail, I'll remember that I typically think it's this, but I'll remember it's this. You see what I'm saying? You kind of build yourself a little structure inside your mind, like a little, a way that you can deduce what you're listening to. And you always win. That's the point of the game, is that you always win. You either win on the guessing game. So if you actually guess it correctly, you get the point. And you also win when you learn why you were wrong. And that's the part that's really important. You want to acknowledge why it was you thought it was something else. So this conversation sprung up at this event that I attended, and the guy went through this process with me, and I told him the name of the game, and then he saw me that night and he guessed incorrectly the orchestra, and he got bummed. And I was like, no, don't get bummed, because now you need to find out what is this quality that you thought belonged to this orchestra, and you need to compare. So what you can do to compare to orchestras, like let's say you are really struggling to distinguish, like me, between Di Sarli and D'Arienzo of the same period, you can do something really simple. You can go online, YouTube, Spotify, whatever, and find 2 songs by those 2 orchestras and compare them from the same time period. And sometimes, very often, you can find the same song that's performed by the 2 orchestras from the same time period. And then you can really hear the differences. So then you start learning to recognize certain stylistic characteristics of the different song. The more you learn about the music, the more you know it, and the more you want to show it. Okay, so there's one more piece to this puzzle that you want to keep in mind. So you're going to have your 4 iconic orchestras that you're going to start recognizing, okay? To go beyond that, once you can recognize those 4, to go beyond that and start adding the other ones, which, by the way, in total, there's about 20 or so that you'll hear semi-regularly at all the milongas. I don't know if it goes beyond 20. 20 is even pretty generous. So you have 4 of them down. So let's say you want to start memorizing, or you want to start recognizing other orchestras. And so what you do is you hear an orchestra that you're not familiar with, and you know it's not one of the 4, but you ask yourself, if they were close to one of the 4, if they were like buddy with one of the 4, which one would it be? Which of the 4 would they kind of jive with? And this is where your sensitivity in your body to your sensation of the music is really the key here. This is how you build familiarity. You need to answer this question not from the perspective of what the sounds are, but how it feels. So an example would be, you might be listening to something like Biagi, Milonguero style Biagi, that's actually also very similar in the way it feels to D'Arienzo. Now, stylistically, they're different orchestras and they have their own unique flavor, but in my body, there's sort of neighboring sensation, the way I feel, how I need to animate, the kind of tone I need to have in my body to dance D'Arienzo is similar to the kind of tone I'm going to have to dance Biagi. And so in my mind, I can group those 2 in the same quadrant in my head. They sort of belong together. And then you do that for others. So you might say, for me, for example, Callot and Troilo are much closer together than Callot, let's say, to D'Arienzo. And I know I'm throwing out these names. Some of you might be familiar with them or not. But don't worry, I'm going to give you a resource that you're going to love. Okay, so none of this is going to remain a mystery for too long. But that way you begin to sort of acclimate yourself to other orchestras. And eventually, what happened for me is that in my head, I have these groupings. I have certain groupings of orchestras that sort of go together, that I just remember with my body, and I can feel how I want to dance them. And I also know who I want to dance them with. So this little game can be practiced for however long you want, as much as you want. You can go to the milonga and you can just try it once. You can try to guess once, or you can do it 3 times. The minimum requirement is really for you to just try to do something to grow your familiarity with the music. It can just be the smallest little step, but I tell you, it's very hard to not have progress if you put in at least the minimum amount of effort. Because as I said, our brains are actually wired for this information. We just need to give the direction. We need to give it the focus and stay with the focus until our neural pathways sort of learn to recognize it. And before long, you'll start recognizing it without even realizing that it's so easy for you. My friend who is an avid hater of Canaro really dislikes Canaro's music because she says it sounds like a fat man walking. When she hears that song, she just talks about how she imagines this really fat guy who is walking in this with these really heavy footsteps, and it's like a cartoon character in her head, and she doesn't like it, but whenever she expresses that, I think, but that's such an achievement that you can recognize that it's Canaro. And to me, if I hear somebody that they don't like Canaro, I can also name 3 other orchestras that they probably don't like. And if they don't like it, then I might not want to dance it with them. I might dance something that they do like. You see how that's kind of like, that's the realm, I think, that tango becomes really fun at, because it's not so much about technique. It's not so much about vocabulary. It's about play. And without that understanding of music, the play is uneven, right? A lot of times you might be dancing with somebody who doesn't know anything about the music, and the dance is fine, and it can be very pleasant. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's actually really frustrating. I've heard a lot of women who complain that they feel so much in the music, but they dance with leaders who are not hearing the same details, in which case I tell them, start leading. That's actually one of the biggest symptoms, I would say, of a closeted leader, a leader who needs to come forth. When I hear a woman who says that she really gets frustrated because she wants to show all these details with the music, but she can't because the partner is not on the same level. That's really a clear sign to me that person needs to start leading, because that's what you get to do. You get to show all of that flavor of the songs. So I'm very excited about you trying this out and letting me know how it goes. And because you listened to this whole episode, I'm not going to leave you hanging. I did mention that I was going to give you the resources to start your journey right now. And that is, I'm going to give you access to my playlist of the 4 orchestras that you need to know. So it's a playlist of Di Sarli, D'Arienzo, Pugliese, and Troilo. These are playlists on Spotify. Okay, so you will have to have a Spotify account, either the free one or the paid one. So that's one playlist that you will have access to. And then the other playlist is a sampling of all of the main orchestras that get played at the milonga. So like 24 or so. Some of them you get to hear rarely. Some of them you get to hear a lot. But it's just a quick sampling of a song by each orchestra to serve you as like kind of a starting point, and then you can click on each individual song and then follow through and go to that orchestra and do a further exploration. So those two playlists you have access to through a link in the show notes below. So go ahead and check it out. And also, if you haven't already, please make sure you join my private Facebook group. I would love to have you in there. The link to that is also in the show notes. Very soon, I will be dancing at the SoCal Tango Championship. I would love to know if I see you there. Please reach out and shoot me a message at IMSO Tango. I'm so Tango. And we will continue our banter next week. Until then,